Hi everybody, it's Christina from Adventures in Polished Land, and happy Friday to you. In today's Friday Reads, I have a reading update, and then I thought I would share some book recommendations because one of the books that I'm going to talk about this week I feel like was a bit overhyped. So I thought now would be a great opportunity to mention a few books that I think lived up to the hype, and then a few books that I think are underhyped that I would like more people to read. So first, let's begin with the reading update. I did end up finishing The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is set in Vermont. We are following a group of college students at a small liberal arts school, and you know from page 1 that they have killed one of their friends. And then the book backtracks and you find out what led up to this murder and why they killed this certain friend. This is quite a big book. It's over 550 pages. It did take me 2 weeks to read, and it took me a little while to get into it, but once I was in the story, I was fully in it, and I didn't feel like the book was too long. In fact, this book started playing mind tricks with me. It was making me nervous. It was making me worried for the characters, but also making me think back to my college days. It was a very engrossing novel, and I ended up really enjoying it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it is so creepy, and it really makes you think about all of the secrets that people may have that you do not know about. So I am glad that I read this book. I do feel like it lived up to the hype for me. And now I am currently reading Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This one is set in Michigan, and it is about a middle-aged mom who is home with her daughters and her husband. We are told that it's pandemic times. They kind of allude to it weirdly. They never mention COVID at all, at least not yet. And they mention slowly that they're all at home together. And then a couple of words about the pandemic and masks get sprinkled in there. But then the main point of the story is our protagonist is telling her daughters about this one summer where she was an actress and she was dating this guy who went on to become a famous movie star. And I am honestly a little bit bored. I'm about halfway through the book, and I don't really care for the characters. The mother and her daughters are fine. I find them a little plain though. And I really dislike her love interest, Duke. I find him so unlikable and gross. I don't really see what's so exciting about him. And after reading The Secret History, that book is so lyrically written. I would say it is a literary thriller. And then when I picked this one up, I was just like, wow, this writing is very basic and plain. So a little bit of a weird transition, and I'm finding that this book was just very overhyped for me. I'm still waiting for like something to happen where it will make me understand why this book is so beloved, but so far it's not quite working for me. But I'm not going to give up on it. I am going to push through. But that being said, I thought it would be interesting if I talked about a few books that were worth the hype for me. So I pulled 3 from my shelves, and these, I would say they're all classics, or at least one of them a modern classic. Let's get started. I'll show you them in the order I picked them from my shelves. So the first one is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This is what I would consider the modern classic. This is a dystopian novel set in a near future America where the birth rate has declined and there's a totalitarian, very conservative government that has overtaken the country. And essentially, if you are able to have children, you are made into a handmaid and you are forced to have children for wealthy couples. That's really watering down the plot. I'm sure most of you know about this storyline, but I absolutely love this book. I've read it at least twice, if not 3 times. I think twice. But it is so well written. It is absolutely horrifying, and I love that it is a found document style book, meaning that somebody has found the story in this novel and they're telling it to you from a future time period where this community does not exist any longer. So I love that element as well. And I do like the sequel, The Testaments, but this one is so good, 5 stars every single time I read it. And I look forward to reading it many more times in my life. Then we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is one of those books where I kept hearing people talk about it and I didn't really know what it was about. This is a gothic novel about a young woman who is working as an assistant basically to this wealthy American who's traveling in the UK and overseas in Europe. And while they're on their trip, her employer gets sick, so she's out and about by herself, and she meets this really wealthy man, Mr. De Winter, and the two of them end up getting married. And this is a big shock to everyone because she is this young, naive woman, and he is this ultra rich guy who is very well respected, and his wife had recently passed away. So this is a very creepy book, very intriguing, a lot of suspense, and it is quite long. But again, this is one of those books that once I started reading it, I got sucked in right away, and I absolutely love the storyline. It can get a little bit contrived, I would say, and you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. But overall, it is a very entertaining read, and I think one that is long-lasting because it is so interesting, and I love how it ends as well. Lots of creepy characters in here, and if you like reading stories that take place on a big estate where the house itself is one of the main characters, I highly recommend this. I have read one of her other books, My Cousin Rachel, and I did enjoy that as well, but not as much as this one. And then the last book that stands up to the hype for me is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I read this a year or two ago, within the last 3 years definitely, and this is a book that I never had to read in school. I wasn't familiar with the story, but I knew it was a coming-of-age novel, and I knew that a lot of people don't like the main character, Holden Caulfield. This book is essentially about this young guy. He's in college and he decides to just skip out on school and have this like adventure in New York City. And he's very sarcastic and he's also very matter of fact. And I tend to really like him. I think a lot of his thoughts are great. He calls people phonies because he can tell they're being fake and putting on an air. And I just could relate to him. And even though I read this in my 30s, I definitely understood where he was coming from, and I also love the New York City setting. There is one scene in particular that isn't necessarily a big part of the plot, so it's not spoiling anything, but he goes to see a Broadway show and he talks about the theater and the crowd outside the theater, and I thought that was very interesting to read about as somebody who loves to see Broadway shows in particular. So if you are looking for a book that, although it is hailed as a YA novel of its time, I think anybody can read it no matter your age, and it's very enjoyable, and I thought pretty funny. I liked it. And then I thought I would talk about 3 books that I personally think are underhyped. These are all backlist titles that should be easy to get your hands on, whether at the library or for very affordably at a used bookstore. And we're going to start out with one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld. I had purchased this at a used bookstore several years ago now. Must have been almost half my life ago, probably. Well, actually, I should see when this was published before I go making that kind of comment. Well, it was published in 2005, so I would have been in high school at that time. So probably half my life ago, I picked up this book randomly because I liked the cover. These belts were very popular at the time, and I thought, oh, this is probably about a prep school, and I'm going to enjoy it. And it is about a prep school. It is about a girl who ends up going to this elite prep school. She does not come from money, and she is the odd one out. She has a very hard time fitting in, and she just doesn't find herself in good company at this school. She has a really difficult time. And I related a lot to this main character because I ended up going to a private liberal arts college, and I was not like the other people there. Everybody wore the same clothes. They had the same bleach blonde hair. They were the same Catholic religion that I had given up because I didn't align with their beliefs. And they all drank and they all went to parties, and I didn't want to do that. So I had a very difficult time in college. And in fact, there's one scene in particular that really stands out to me, and it's when her parents come and visit her at school and she feels so embarrassed because she feels like she sticks out like a sore thumb, and people can tell her parents aren't like the other wealthy parents because they're not wealthy. And I felt the same way, which I think looking back is totally normal, but at the time I felt so embarrassed. And so this book I really related to. I've read it multiple times and really enjoy it. So if you like prep school books or boarding school books that deal with a girl who doesn't fit in, I highly recommend this one. And then I thought I would recommend a Kevin Wilson book because I feel like Kevin Wilson can be a pretty popular author, but I don't see other people talk about this book, and it's Perfect Little World, which is such a beautiful story. It is about a community where people decide to try to create a utopian society where they are raising their children together in community. So essentially, they find couples who are all giving birth around the same time, and they decide to live together, and they raise their children together without telling them who is their biological parents. And our main character is a single woman. They let her in even though she's not married. She's kind of the anomaly, but they let her in, and she finds herself as part of this community as well. And I absolutely love this book. I love dystopian novels, but I have learned that I've come to love utopian novels as well. And I find this book just very sweet and enjoyable. Not everything goes perfectly in the novel, but I think they have a great social experiment going on, and it really works for me. I gave this book 5 stars, and I've wanted to reread it ever since I first read it, which I got this from Book of the Month in February 2017. So it's been almost 10 years now. I really need to reread this. So maybe you can read it and I will reread it. And the last book that I am sharing for what I think is underhyped is a Stephen King book. And I know what you're thinking. Stephen King is such a popular author, and he is, but this is one of his books that I rarely hear anyone talk about, and that is The Dead Zone. So I am reading all of Stephen King's novels in chronological publishing order. This is one of the earlier ones, and it's one of my favorites that I have read so far. So this one is about a young man who, I'm forgetting the exact circumstances where he develops this power, but he starts to be able to have this ability to foresee what's going to happen in the future. And so he finds out that there is this guy running for office, and he's a terrible person. He acts like he's your next door neighbor, and he's just going to be like this everyday guy who's running as a politician, and he's going to be the politician for the everyday man. And our main character sees right through that. He can tell that this guy is going to be very bad, do horrible things for the community and the country at large eventually. And so he sets out to get rid of this man. And I really enjoy this book because it is a political story. I really enjoy reading about politics, especially when it's in fiction, because you can relate it to what's happening in the real world, but it's not the real world, so you can enjoy it a little bit more. And that's why I like this book. And the politician in this book definitely reminds me of somebody who ended up being, the president of our country today. Not exactly the same, but I think Stephen King has this uncanny ability to predict the future in a lot of his fiction books that were published decades ago. And for me, this one just gets a little too close to home, but that's why I really enjoy it. And now that I think about it, the ending of this book reminds me of something that happened not too long ago, which is a little bit weird. So I would recommend this book if you like how Stephen King puts sort of a science fiction-y twist on a real life novel that has to do with politics. I definitely recommend this. So that is everything for this Friday Reads video. I hope you learned something with my book recommendations. I am going to be spending the rest of this weekend finishing Tom Lake, hopefully. And then I'm probably going to move into Stoner by John Williams. I am also now realizing that I don't think I got notified about one of my library holds that shipped over a week ago. So I'm going to have to turn this video off and check on that library hold to see if it's there, because I need to pick it up if it is. But that is it for today. I hope you're having a great weekend. Enjoy it if you have a long weekend like I do, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.